Well, good morning, Campbell River. It is the second week of March, and a bunch of people got up this morning on time. I saw that on the YouTube. That's great. One thing you've noticed is that, it's time for a different shirt every week and something different. Well, we are in the season of Lent. The color is purple, but Wednesday is St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is my daughter's birthday. She was born on St. Patrick's Day. She had two Irish surgeons in a C-section, and so they really wanted to call her Patricia, but Sandra said, no, we're calling her Sarah. It is our birthday. It's one of those decade ones, but I'm not allowed to say which decade. Yes, St. Patrick's Day. So we're wearing the green. But St. Patrick, he had the shamrock, it's one of those things he uses an illustration. We think he used it as an illustration about the Trinity. There were three leaves, but it's really only one leaf, so three persons, one God. The ultimate question is what we're going to be talking about this morning. But before we do that, I do have to tell you why I'm wearing orange. Do you realize in Ireland, there is the orange and the green? Have a look at the Irish flag. It is orange and green, and there's white in the middle. Now, the green is the Catholic part of Ireland. So really, if you are Catholic, you wear green. A Protestant would never wear green. Protestant wears orange because of the Orange Lodge. The Orange Lodge celebrates the victory of the Protestant King William of Orange from the Netherlands, who came and defeated the Catholic King James II of England on 12 July 1690. And that affected Ireland significantly because then you have the Protestants and Catholics, the orange and the green. Now, one of the writers, Anthony Murphy of Liverpool, wrote a tune, and Jimmy Ferguson of the Irish Rovers sang this tune back in 1995, and it really impacted my life. Not really impacted my life, it just kind of was a little bit close to my own story. What happens when your mother is orange and your father's green? He wrote a song called The Orange and the Green. I'm going to give you the verse. I'm not going to sing it all for you. I'll give you the chorus. I'll sing the chorus for you, but I'm not going to sing the whole thing. I will read it for you, okay? Is that okay? We'll do that. So, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. My mother was an Ulster girl, proud Protestant was she. My father was a Catholic man from County Cork, was he. They were married in two churches, lived happily enough until the day that I was born and things got rather tough. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. Baptized by Father Riley, I was rushed away by car to be made a little orangeman, me mother's shining star. I was christened David Anthony, but still, in spite of that, to me mother I was William, while me father called me Pat. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. With father every Sunday to mass I'd proudly stroll. Then after that the Orange Lodge would try to save my soul. For both sides tried to claim me, but I was smart because I'd play the flute or play the harp, depending where I was. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. One day me ma's relations came round to visit me, just as my father's kinfolk were sitting down to tea. We tried to smooth things over, but they all began to fight, and me being strictly neutral, I bashed everyone in sight. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. My parents never could agree about me type of school. Me learning was all done at home, that's why I'm such a fool. They both passed on, God rest them, but left me caught between the awful color problem of the orange and the green. Oh, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. Me mother, she was orange, and me father, he was green. That's the orange and the green. Yes, my mom was a Baptist. My father was raised as a Catholic. But it really was never that much of a problem in our house. My dad being raised Catholic, he still came to our Baptist church every Sunday morning. I remember sitting with him in the 3-year-old Sunday school class with Mrs. Thorpe as the teacher. But when I was 5 years old, my dad made a decision to become a true follower of Jesus Christ at the age of 31. He really appreciated the help of Pastor McKee. My mother had made the decision to be a follower of Jesus Christ way back in her mid-teens when she was in Saskatchewan, going to a Baptist church, but I think she was saved actually in a United Church, believe it or not, a United Church youth group. Well, we're in week number 4 of our Easter experience. This week's session 4 is My Life Has a Plan, with a focus on Mary, the mother of Jesus. You know, life is often different than we had expected. Is there a plan? Does God have a plan? Now, if you're going and using the Lent experience with Eric Ferris, his topic for Lent this week is almsgiving. Now, this morning, we're going to continue our second week in our series called The Ultimate Question. We're considering the people who were around Jesus as he was suffering on the cross. And the ultimate question they had to answer was, what will you do with Jesus? Last week, we saw that the soldiers dismissed him. They didn't even consider him as an option to be concerned about. We saw how easily that can happen in our own lives today. Now, we're going to look at another group of people standing at the cross. Let me start with a personal story. It's 1975. It's Christmas Eve. I'm joining my girlfriend's family at midnight service at St. Peter's Anglican Church. And it starts to snow. Beautiful Christmas Eve service. Snow. It's about 12 o'clock. We got out from service. We went back to their house. Now, I've got a ring in the pocket of my coat worth 2 months' salary. And when we were sitting in the church, the usher came along and took my coat and put it way in the back. And I'm like, but I couldn't even say why I didn't want him to take my coat. We'd been dating for 2.5 years. Tonight was going to be the night I'm going to pop the question. Now, I'm pretty sure of the answer, but you know, the fear of rejection hangs in the air. After the midnight service, we go downstairs at Sandra's place. We're going down. She wanted to show me the present that she had gotten me. Her dad had found a wood lathe on a used classifieds, and here was this wood lathe. And I hardly even looked at it, actually. I'm more nervous about what I've got to do. And so I put my hand in my pocket. I pull out this box, this ring. I did not get down on one knee. That's too traditional. This was the 60s. We were getting rid of tradition. But I did put the ring out there. And I will say she said yes, and her eyes sparkled larger than the diamond. Now, you know, I've also, at Camp Quanos, seen a few camp proposals. Now, they were big deals. They had elaborate setup. They had film crews to videotape the whole thing to go on YouTube later. And that's all great as long as she says yes. But I did watch a YouTube proposal that was at the center court of an NBA basketball game. And the guy's down on his knee saying, "Will you?" And she's going, gee, sorry, no, and walks away. And even the announcers are kind of going, oh, wow, talk about rejection. This morning we're talking about rejection. Rejection. Rejection hurts. In some form or another, I'm sure that all of us have experienced that reality of being rejected. Maybe sitting by yourself in the lunchroom, or hoping not to be the last one chosen for the team at recess, or waiting for someone to invite you to the dance, or skipped over for a promotion at work, or maybe not being invited out with some friends. Rejection really does hurt, and that's a scientific fact. There was a Reuter article called Studies Find Rejection is Literally a Huge Pain in the Chicago Tribune back in 2003. Matt Lieberman was a social psychologist at the University of California. And he says, you know that kicked in the gut feeling, those physical symptoms of rejection. Well, they did brain imaging studies that a social snub affects the brain precisely the way physical pain does. So they had some volunteers, they brought him in, they gave him a task. They didn't know it was related to social snubbing, but as the MRI was monitoring the brain, they found when they felt rejected, it lit up that part of the brain that lit up whenever you felt physical pain. So when we use physical metaphors to describe social pain, like a broken heart or hurt feelings, we actually see those really do happen. Rejection hurts you just as much as physical pain. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah predicted that the Messiah would be rejected by the people. In Isaiah 53:3, it says, "He was despised and rejected by mankind." As Jesus was crucified, he's on the cross, he's staring down at all these people around him. We see the soldiers dismissed him, but the people rejected him. Jesus was brought before Pilate, the governor, the Roman governor of Judea. And after considering the accusations and talking to Jesus, Pilate couldn't find any charges to bring against him. But he said this, Matthew 27, verses 22 and 23. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Christ?" Pilate asked. The people all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Do you remember the ultimate question? What will you do with Jesus? Pilate asked the ultimate question of himself. What shall I do with Jesus? But instead of answering the question for himself, Pilate did what many people do. He took an opinion poll. What do the majority of people think about Jesus? You know, it's in a popular way today to determine truth. The trouble is, it's not always reliable. The majority don't always know the truth. In fact, many people don't even believe that there is truth. You know, the majority once believed that slavery was acceptable, even God ordained. The majority of people once believed women couldn't learn the same as men. The majority in Germany once supported Hitler. And as you see in this next slide, the majority once wore bright all-star Converse shoes and parachute pants and sported a mullet. And they thought that was cool. Not so cool today. So Pilate asked the people what they want to do with Jesus, and the people respond, they wanted to reject Jesus. The question we want to ask this morning is, what caused the people to reject Jesus? Now, they don't give Pilate a reason. Instead, they just shout, "Crucify him, crucify him." And we're left wondering why. Why was Jesus so rejected? As we answer that question, we're going to find that things haven't really changed. Many people reject Jesus today because of a number of reasons. And I'm going to give you 3 of them this morning. That people back then rejected Jesus, people still reject Jesus for these same reasons today. Maybe you have struggled with some of these reasons. Maybe you're still struggling with one of these reasons. Reason number 1, why people reject Jesus. Jesus claimed to be God. We read that in the trial transcripts that Matthew gave us. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Now, this claim did infuriate the religious leaders, and Jesus really did say this thing. However, he was referring to destroying the temple of his own body, and in another 3 days, his figurative language would become crystal clear as Jesus rose from the dead, as his body is resurrected, destroyed, rebuilt in 3 days. But it wasn't sufficient cause for an arrest, let alone death. So we continue to read these trial manuscripts, verse 63 and 64. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do you need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He is worthy of death." They answered, "Are you the Christ?" Now that's a title in Greek. That's the Greek title. In Hebrew, it would be Messiah. In English, we would literally translate it as the Anointed One. Messiah was prophesied about for hundreds of years. Daniel's dating, the prophet Daniel's dating, indicates that Messiah would be coming in the time of Jesus, exactly at the right time. There were lots of people looking for Messiah. They knew, Daniel said, it should be now. Not only the Messiah, but these words were added. Are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God? Now that's a claim hinting at being God. And it's crucial to our understanding of Christianity. An extremely bold statement that Jesus says, yes. That would be correct. They would be correct in saying he was blaspheming if he wasn't the Messiah, the Son of God. So in deciding what you will do with Jesus, you have to deal with Jesus' divinity. Jesus is God. The writer C.S. Lewis defines these options well, and this has been quoted over and over in sermons, in books, and on the internet. Here's C.S. Lewis in God is in the Dock. And here is his quote. Either this man, Jesus, was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Jesus was not simply a great human teacher like Confucius, Aristotle, Socrates. Some of the things he said are crazy if they're not true. Either he was and is God, or he's a deceiver or a nutcase. Many places Jesus claimed to be divine. In John 8, verse 58, it says, "I tell you the truth," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." A very weird construction. And the people understood immediately what he was saying. It says they took up stones to stone him. Those words, "I am," are referring to Exodus, where God says, "I am that I am." So if Jesus said, "I am," it meant he was saying he was God. Jesus was 100% human and 100% divine. In Colossians 2:9 it says, "For in Christ all the fullness, all the pleroma of the deity lives in bodily form." In the Greek understanding of life, pleroma meant the fullness of Godhead, the full spiritualness. And they had separated spirit and body. Spirit is good, body is bad. You can't be both at the same time, and that was the whole problem in Colossians that Paul was trying to deal with, saying Jesus was spirit and body. Jesus was God, the pleroma. So where do you stand on this? Is Jesus the Son of God? It's a most important question. So one of the evidences, let me go through quickly some of the evidences for his divinity. One of the evidences is his complete fulfillment of prophecies. In Luke 24:44, it says, Jesus said, "Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." The prophecies about Jesus are as convincing as fingerprints or DNA. A virgin birth in Bethlehem, being crucified with robbers before crucifixion had even been heard of, buried in the tomb of rich men. Now somebody say, yeah, but what if he staged all those fulfillments? Well, Messiah's ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, maybe he could have done that. But to engineer his own crucifixion to fulfill prophecy? Probably not. Born in Bethlehem, couldn't do that. Being bought with 30 pieces of silver, being of the line of David, men would gamble for his clothes after his death, performing miracles, being constantly surrounded by critics. Well, what if they were just coincidences? You know, it was a coincidence they all happened. Well, Peter Stoner was a science professor, and he, along with 600 students, wanted to calculate the mathematical probability of Jesus fulfilling just 48 of the prophecies. There are over 300. But he says, well, what if just 48 happened to one person? The chances of that happening are 1 in 10 to the 157th power. That means 1 in 10 followed by 157 zeros. Leo Strobel, as he was writing his book, tried to understand what that number was. He said it is the odds of Jesus fulfilling 48 prophecies is like finding one specific atom in a trillion billion atoms spread out over our universe. It is just not going to happen. These prophecies are like a fingerprint that could only match the Messiah. Jesus fulfilled them all. Old Testament prophecies were God's identifying sign. Another evidence for his divinity is his uncompromised character. You know, sometimes you know someone, and the more you know them, the more you're aware of their shortcomings. Well, the Apostle John said, "In him is no sin," and Peter said, "He committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth." Jesus did not have sin. His character gives credibility to his claim. An evidence for his divinity is his miraculous power. In John chapter 10, we read, "Even though you do not believe me," Jesus says, "believe the miracles." And again, he says, "The miracles I do in my Father's name speak for me." You know, anyone can claim to be the Son of God. But he says, "I have done miracles supernaturally to show you." They weren't done in secret. They were done in broad daylight. They were done in front of skeptics and cynics. The historian Josephus, who wrote his histories around 75 AD, admits that Jesus did the miraculous. Another evidence for his divinity is his avoidable death. Jesus was on trial for blasphemy. He could have avoided his death by simply saying he wasn't the Son of God. He could have stopped the nails if he would have denied his identity as God. Another evidence for his divinity is his verifiable resurrection. In Acts 2:32, Peter says, "God has raised this Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses of the fact." Jesus appeared to more than 500 people. The Apostle Thomas said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." He demanded proof, and he got it. Jesus appeared to him and says, "Look, here they are, Thomas." And Thomas's response was, "My Lord and my God." Now this was a Jewish man raised from infancy to believe in one God. And he says, "Jesus, you're my Lord and my God." Any man that walks out of his own grave is anything he says he is. Another evidence for his divinity is his faithful followers. When Jesus died, nearly all his disciples abandoned him, confused, terrified, afraid to die themselves. After the resurrection, everything changed. They boldly told of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The closest followers of Jesus were fully convinced. They taught it, and they died for it. Would they die for a lie? If they knew this was a lie, would they die for it? Matthew was killed by a sword in Ethiopia. Mark died in Alexandria, Egypt, after being dragged by horses through the streets until he was dead. Luke was hanged in Greece. Peter was crucified upside down. Thomas was stabbed with a spear in India during a missionary trip. Jude, the brother of Jesus, was killed with arrows when he refused to deny his faith in Christ. The people who knew him best were fully convinced. Could they have conspired to fabricate a myth? Hey guys, let's keep the gag going, even if it kills us. You know, many have died for lies that they believed were true, but no one dies for what they know is not true. The disciples didn't just believe, they knew. They knew Jesus was the real deal, and nearly all of them died for it. Jesus claimed that he was God, and so people rejected him. But there's another reason why many of the people rejected Jesus. Reason number 2, Jesus didn't fit what they wanted. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." His kingdom was spiritual, not political. The people were longing for a Messiah to save them from their immediate circumstances, either to bring peace with Rome or to overthrow the Roman government and establish another kingdom like they had when King David was reigning and King Solomon back in the good old days. Jesus didn't fit their Messiah mold. His kingdom was spiritual, not political. Jesus didn't fit what they wanted. He didn't keep their religious traditions. He ate grain without washing his hands. They healed on the Sabbath. His relationship with God was not about being legalistically following a list of rules. It was about being in the kingdom. Jesus also associated with the wrong people. He accepted those whom society had rejected. He said, the first will be last and the last will be first. And he hung out with social misfits, the unclean, the immoral, the uneducated, the dishonest. He said, first will be last and last will be first. Jesus didn't fit what they wanted. He was a threat to the authority of religious leaders. In Matthew 15:18, he says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." On 2 occasions, he cleansed the temple courts. He drove out the animals and the dishonest money changers out of God's house. Now, it was a huge, profitable business. The leaders would try to trap Jesus with some question, to trap him, to make him unappealing to the people, but Jesus always turned the tables on them. He took them to task for their actions. He took them to task for the condition of their hearts. Jesus claimed that he was God, and so people rejected him. Jesus didn't fit what they wanted, and so people turned their backs on him. But there's another reason, last reason today, that we'll look at why many of the people rejected Jesus. Jesus demands life change. Here's some verses in John 8. "Go now and leave your life of sin," he said to the woman caught in adultery. All the people were around trying to accuse her. And Jesus says, "Go, leave your life of sin." Another time, Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Grace is given, but change is expected. Sometimes people think, I'm all for Jesus as long as he doesn't require a change in my lifestyle. Or Jesus is great as long as he's making the lame to walk and the blind to see, but I don't want to have to change. And Jesus says it requires a full submission to me. I remember my dad. When he became a believer in Jesus Christ, there was a change in his life. And even at 5 years old, I saw it. I remember sitting with my dad and watching him roll his cigarettes. And I sat in the car while he went into the pub to get his beer. But, after he became a believer, he didn't do those things anymore. He started doing, I remember him leading boys club. And I was telling the boys how he came to know Jesus as a Savior. There was a big change in my dad. Jesus demands change, a submission to him. Crowds begin to thin out when Jesus would say, "If anyone would come after me, he must take up his cross and follow me." Constantly raising the bar when it came to our moral lives. He didn't water down the message. He didn't just speak the comfortable truth. He spoke the whole truth. And as a result, many people rejected him because too much change was necessary. Often I find people that reject Jesus hide behind spiritual smokescreens. The Bible's full of contradictions. The Bible's full of hypocrites. The church is full of hypocrites. I don't believe Jesus is really God's Son. Now, even when we challenge those suppositions, when they are addressed people continue to find new ones. They aren't rejecting Jesus because of intellectual or theological issues. They're just unwilling to surrender their lives. Jesus is offering to be the Lord of your life. It's free, it's grace, it's mercy, but there it is. Rejection hurts. We've all experienced the truth of that. We remember the pain of rejection as a child. Two teams are choosing sides for baseball, and we remember the pain of being perhaps the skinny kid with glasses, or never chosen first, or never chosen with much enthusiasm. The cross is the ultimate symbol of being chosen. God hasn't rejected you. Through Jesus Christ, He accepts you and welcomes you. Jesus was rejected so that you would not be rejected. So how will you answer the ultimate question that Pilate asked? What shall I do then with Jesus who is called Christ? What will you do with Jesus? I want to close this morning by reading a prayer. This prayer was written in 377 AD. It is called St. Patrick's Lorica. And the lorica was a breastplate for a Roman soldier. It was called a lorica. Well, this was St. Patrick's lorica. It was what he recited every day as he got up. His protection, he would put this protection on. We had a captain in the Canadian Air Force when we were in Souk, and he served in Afghanistan. He said every morning, this is what he read. St. Patrick's Lorica. I've shortened it to about half. It's quite long, so I've shortened it down. I want to read some of these for you. They'll come on the screen and you can kind of follow along. Patrick's breastplate. I arise today through the strength of Christ's birth and His baptism, through the strength of His crucifixion and His burial, through the strength of His resurrection and His ascension, through the strength of His descent for the judgment of doom. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's eye to look before me, God's ear to hear me, God's word to speak for me, God's hand to guard me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me, God's hosts to save me from the snares of the devil, from the temptations of vices, from everyone who desires me ill, afar and anear, alone or in a multitude. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of every man who speaks of me, Christ in the eye that sees me, Christ in the ear that hears me. I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through a belief in the threeness, through a confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. Amen.